Hello and welcome to today's window in your Advent calendar. Today's project is inspired by the Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing holes and cracks with gold. My name is Jolene. I'm a psychotherapist and art facilitator in the UK, and together with my co-partner Lucy, we produce a wonderful community Facebook group called Live Art Journaling and Self-Development, the link of which is below. These wonderful bits of textile paper are produced using sellotape, believe it or not, and our jelly plate, and are a wonderful product in their own right to use as little bits and pieces of accessories and accents in your art journaling and creativity. But we're going to do a little project with them today. You're going to need sellotape, greaseproof paper, a jelly plate, some stencils. You're going to need some paper to take some prints, and the special ingredient of some gold or silver leaf. Of course, you're going to need a plethora of acrylic paint or acrylic ink. I'm going to use a large jelly plate for the benefit of you being able to see what I'm doing, but should you only have a small jelly plate, I'm going to show you how to use that later on. I always have a pad of paper to hand just so I can roll my brayer off, and you can see on these cards that I have actually already done some jelly printing on them, and I'll run through that video later. I wanted to test out whether I could use my smaller jelly plate, and indeed I could, so that's why those small prints are there. I take my jelly plate and I'm going to do something of which there are a huge amount of videos out there, which is to take some grunge prints. Now, the idea behind grunge prints is that you use layers and layers of paint to slowly build up texture and paint on your jelly plate, which when lifted as a whole creates that sort of painted peel feeling that you get when you look at an old gate or a worn door. We're going to need that for two reasons. We're going to build up a load of papers which we can pull out on Christmas Day or Boxing Day when you're sat there in a house where you just need something to fiddle with. And we're also going to use the texture to create a wonderful pocket, a little holder to hold all of these pieces of artwork in. Something that for me is quite Christmassy, but also holds this idea of kintsugi. Now you can see here that what I've begun with is a purple and blue layer, and I've placed my stencils down and I'm just pressing this paper on top of those stencils to get the prints through. If you don't have any stencils, don't worry, you can just as easily do this by layering up paint onto your jelly plate and just lifting sections off. That would also be quite beautiful. And you can easily see that as I said before, I've got lots of paint on there from some prints I did earlier on. Now, in between the painty layers, you can see now I pull these stencils off. In between these painty layers, I'm going to let them dry just a little bit, literally a matter of 10 to 15 seconds. And then I'm going to put another layer of paint over the top and take even more stencils. But I'm not going to clean my jelly plate in between. And that's because I want to build up this grunge layer. I wanted to say a bit about why I've chosen to do this project, and for me, what kintsugi is all about. As I said at the beginning, I'm a psychotherapist and creative facilitator. And boy, oh boy, this year have we all needed to have some support. Have we all needed to experience some pretty difficult feelings? And bit by bit, all of what we've known about living and community and humanity has sort of been peeled and chipped away. And I believe what's been left are some beautiful gaps or cracks in everything that we've known, which we can start filling up with gold. And that is the idea of kintsugi. The Japanese take a pot, and if it is broken, instead of throwing it away, they heal it and mend it with gold. And gold is the most valuable part. The cracks become the most valuable part of the pot. And indeed, that's what I believe. It's certainly my hope that we will begin to mend our earth a little bit with gold. So you can see here, when I press my paper into this paint quite hard, if I'm quite rough with it, I pick up that purple and blue layer as well as the green layer, so I get this really grungy feeling. And can you see also that on my jelly plate, I'm also starting to uncover all of those layers. So you can't just see the top layer, you can see all these patchy layers underneath. Now ordinarily, when we're playing with a jelly plate, what we're looking to do is lift that very first layer with all the other layers behind it. You could say, for instance, that the last paint layer that you put on a jelly plate is the background, and the first print that you put on your jelly plate is the foreground. For this project, we're actually going to use both ways. So I'm taking prints, as you can see, and those first layers are my foreground. But when I use the sellotape and a little bit of trickery at the end, you're going to see that what you're left with on the jelly plate actually becomes the most important bit. It's probably one of those things that's easier to show you than to talk about, so keep your eyes on me. These are little shards of deli paper that I'm just ripping, and almost like little clouds, they're going to float their way across my jelly plate. And I'm pressing them down. Now you must use deli paper or greaseproof paper for this. Don't use standard paper, because we've now got quite a few layers of sticky acrylic paint on that gel plate. And if I was to just use standard paper, when I lift that off, that paper is going to remain stuck to my jelly plate. And we don't want that. What we want is to lift that deli paper off and be left with some amazing gaps, which we are literally going to flood with gold. Okay, let's put the final layer of paint on. So you can see here I'm using quite a thin layer of paint here. I want it to end up quite patchy, and I'm carefully painting over the top of that deli paper. This is going to be our top layer, bizarrely. There you go. That's not what you normally see on a jelly plate, is it? Normally this layer here becomes our bottom layer, but it's going to be our top layer. I'm going to slowly take off these deli prints, and you can see that because we sort of made sure that they were stuck down onto that paint, they are lifting up a considerable amount of those layers, and we're left with this grungy texture. It's sort of all speckled with bits and pieces of paint and texture that we've had along the way. Now also, because I've used quite a patchy layer of paint on that top layer, you can start to see as it settles, all of those other colours are starting to show through it a little bit, and this will become more evident in a minute. I'm laying down my wide packing tape. It is better to use wide tape than thin tape, purely for the strength. And I'm overlapping it a little bit, so one length is overlapped on the other, and I'm going to lay that down, and then I'm going to use my hand to buffer it down, and then you're going to see me take a little bit of folded up paper, and I'm going to use even that to rub over the surface of that sellotape, really buffering that in. And what this is doing is that very thin, patchy final layer of pink, I'm sort of really smooshing it in with all the other colours, and I'm making sure that everything sticks as much as possible to that little bit of sticky tape. And when I lift it up, it's going to be this amazing transfer of a rainbow, a myriad of colours. I take two very scrappy bits of blue paper there and stick them both ends of that peeled off paint. Doesn't it look quite sort of like a Martian landscape, I think? Anyway, I take those two bits of paper and I just stick them on either end of that sticky tape so that I can move it around easily. And then I'm going to cover this reverse layer with gold leaf. Couldn't think of the word then. And I'm covered in it. I know it's fiddly and I know it's faffy, but there is something quite beautiful about taking time to just peel those very thin, delicate layers of gold away and put them onto your surface. I then take a piece of paper and just rub it over the surface, and this really helps that gold leaf to stick. Now, in some areas it's going to stick to the acrylic paint and to the sticky tape, and in other areas it will just stick to the sticky tape. So you're going to take a brush, and we start off by brushing gently over the surface, just lifting off any little tiny excess bits that are easily removable. And then I get a little bit rougher, and really I just work over the whole piece, being a bit more brutal with my brush, and it will pick up any little bits of gold leaf that perhaps are not quite as stuck down as the other. And this means that you get this lovely texture of gold and paint and colour all over the surface of your piece. Now here you can see a piece I did earlier where I have put the wide packing tape over the back as well, and indeed that's going to be the final process. Here I've got a piece where I stuck some music paper on the back of it just by using some gel medium on the music paper and then sticking it over. But I wanted to show you first how I use a small jelly plate to construct the size of sellotape paper, or we're going to call it kintsugi sellotape. I'm going to show you how I construct a large piece, because there's no reason for you not to do this project if you only have a small jelly plate. It's absolutely possible. So I'm just going to let you listen to the music and you're going to watch me play along. If you haven't yet discovered why these videos are out, where have you been? This video is part of the Advent windows, which are produced every year for the Facebook group Live Art Journaling and Self-Development. The link is in the description below. And every year my colleague and I, Lucy, who run the Facebook group with me, we put out an ask from our YouTube friends and get them to come along and produce some videos as part of an Advent window, an Advent calendar for our viewers. We're so pleased that you found us, and we always love to meet new people. Our Facebook group is such a lovely community space, so we welcome you there. Okay, so if you only have a small jelly plate, you'll get a number of pieces to this stage, and then you just use packing tape on the back of all of them, so do them all at the same time, and stick them down so that at least on the reverse you have one full layer of sellotape. So even if on the front layer you only have sellotape that is down the creases in between the pieces, the back is all one layer. So you would stick 7 or 8 pieces together, then you would do the back sellotape. Now, for our final project, we're going to make an envelope, and I'm not going to give you exact measurements because it is dependent on what papers you have. And you can always, of course, cut the papers down afterwards. In the end, I used an 8x10 jelly plate, and I've got 2 pieces of my Kintsugi sellotape, and I'm going to stick a solid one and a half one together. Now that one on the right hand side, the bluey one, has already got sellotape on both sides, unfortunately, because I did it earlier. You know, I would have preferred to have not put the sellotape on the back first and been able to stick the 2 together, but there you go, we have what we have. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to place those 2 pieces alongside each other, and that bluey piece there on the right hand side, that will become my flap of my envelope, and the piece on the left hand side will be the body of my envelope. I'm just going to place the 2 pieces next to each other, and then I'm going to cover them in sellotape exactly like I did with those small pieces, and then I'm going to put a bit of sellotape on the join at the front, and then we have our fabric all ready to construct our envelope. If you've got a really nice sharp paper cutter, you can cut this. Go nice and slowly and firmly, and you will get a nice crisp edge. If you haven't, just take a pair of scissors and cut it nice and straight, or perhaps a ruler and a craft knife. Again, I'm not going to give you perfect measurements because it really doesn't matter. These are sort of a one project fits all. You want to fold the bottom up, and then we're going to fold that top bit down so it looks like sort of a clutch bag. In order to construct this so it kind of looks a bit arty, I'm going to cut a curve on my flap that comes down. I just fold my fabric over, and the great thing about this being made of sellotape is that those folds are so easily removed because sellotape's actually quite forgiving. I use a little bit of that blue again, but the other way up. I use that to construct something that I guess looks like a buckle for me. I wonder how you're going to decorate yours, because this is the way that I'm doing mine, and you're very welcome to copy mine, but you know, have fun with yours. I stick that little tab down with a good craft glue, but I do actually end up sewing around that as well, just so that stays in place. Now, in order to make sure that this has got enough room in it to fit all of our little deli prints on those bits of paper, and so that we can carry it around and take it out when we're bored and do some doodles, I fold a concertina fan just into that bottom edge. And that's just going to mean it can puff out at the bottom. I can stick a couple of pens in there. You know, we get that width at the bottom like a paper bag. And then what I'm going to do is rush on over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch up both of those sides and along the curved edge of my flap. Here we are. Again, I'm so excited to see what you choose to do with your project. So now I choose to just cut off the same curve at that buckle point. And then I'm going to use my crocodile just to place a hole in that top to make it nice and secure. You could just use a hole punch. You could do anything you wanted, really. I'm just going to use a hole punch and then stick some ribbon in there, and that will be my closure. There's something really quite delicious about having a journal in the form of an envelope where I can just remove my little doodle pieces of paper and play on them at will. I'm imagining when I'm sort of sat somewhere and perhaps the kids are playing or washing up's being done. I can remove myself to a corner of the sofa with maybe just a white gel pen and just doodle to my heart's content. Because let's face it, over Christmas it's busy enough without having to get all of your products out. It's been so wonderful to be part of this Advent hop again, to meet new people, to support other YouTube artists. But mainly it's been really interesting to really sit with this thought of kintsugi and how the cracks, the gaps, the spaces that are created when things start to fall apart a little bit, how those cracks could be actually the most important parts of our artwork. I really look forward to meeting you all. Head over to the Facebook group as soon as you can, and you'll be able to find all of the links to the other YouTube Advent Hop videos in our pinned post at the top of the group. Sending you so much love. See you soon.